Well, good morning, everyone in the audience, as well as the online delegates. Hearty good morning, good afternoon, good evening to those that have registered for this Global Conference on Sustainable Plant Production. And today is the second day of the GPC, and specifically this session that you are now attending is the Natural Resource Management session. We were a group of three with Dr. Graziella Metternich, myself, and Sami Singore that assisted the FAO and the organizing committee to put this program together of this thematic session on natural resource management. And we hope to have Graziella Metternich online to say a few words, but it seemed to me she's not connected as yet. But I believe we should start. And as I've said, this is the second day, and the thematic sessions with presentations in this thematic session is aligned on the two main topics. The first one, the early morning session here in Rome, is maximizing resource use efficiency. And then after the break, session 4.2 will focus on ecosystem approaches to resilience. So this will be the two sessions. And the natural resource management thematic session is, of course, promoting sustainable crop production, and that can imply techniques, processes, and practices that optimizes use of soil, water, and nutrients, using integrated approaches that maintain the multiple services of productive ecosystems, and when necessary, restore those that are degraded. Increasing diversity, recycling, and efficiency of plant production systems based on ecological principles can enhance the resilience of people, communities, and ecosystems, which is key to sustainable food systems. Innovations for sustainable production systems respond better to local and global challenges when they are co-created by combining local and scientific knowledge. So without further ado, can we then move into this sub-session 4.1, maximizing resource use efficiency, where we have 5 eminent speakers this morning. With the very first speaker, we would like to welcome Rebecca J. Nelson. She's a professor, School of Integrative Plant Science, Cornell University, and former research director of McKnight Foundation. And Professor Rebecca can't be here with us physically, but she has sent us a video of her presentation. So could we please play the video? Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Nelson from Cornell University, greeting you from upstate New York, and thanking the FAO and the GPC for the invitation today to talk to you about our work towards a circular bionutrient economy that links sanitation and agriculture. So of course, agriculture is connected causally to sanitation, and the idea here is to reciprocate and circularize those nutrients so that for the benefit of healthier soils, healthier people and healthier planet. So I've decorated this slide with the FAO symbol for the agroecological element of the circular and reciprocal economy, of which circular bionutrient economy is part, and also our slogan here, P is for plants. So this theme of circular bionutrient economy is catching hold a bit now, because with the current spike in fertilizer prices that we've been experiencing recently, caused by, as this headline says, too many factors to count, we have to start thinking about where can we source plant nutrients and soil amendments in a way that, how can we source them in a way that is affordable to people and is sustainable, and really particularly allows nutrient sovereignty from people who suffer the most from these really high and going higher nutrient prices. So the question arises on the backdrop of a long-term structural problem with our current food system and our current sanitation system. So we bring food, so that's the carbon and nutrients derived from typically rural soils. We bring them typically dominantly to urban areas, where once they're consumed, the nutrients become pollutants for the urban and aquatic environment. So we've got this massive depletion of carbon and nutrients of most of the world's soils, while the vast majority of those nutrients and carbon in that excreta go untreated into waterways. So 2.3 billion people lack even basic sanitation, and even people that have some form of sanitation often are passing those nutrients either into the environment in one way or another, or into the atmosphere. So the idea is, how can we return the carbon and nutrients into the soils, either rural, peri-urban, or urban for urban agriculture? So this slide now shows that if we're able to recover the nitrogen from urine, it could replace a significant amount of the synthetic nitrogen. So actually, basically, most or all of the synthetic nitrogen budget in much of Africa could be replaced by the nutrients in urine. And in a country like the United States, it's estimated around 6 to 25% of the applied nitrogen could be replaced synthetic to natural bionutrient. So there's a lot going on, a way to turn urine into solid fertilizer that could make farming more sustainable. There's a lot going on in this field now. So I first got interested in the proposition because I worked for the last few years on the problem of aflatoxin, a fungal contaminant that brings toxic components into a large majority of the world's foodstuffs. So my student Samuel Matiga at the time was working with CIMMYT in a project that was looking for maize germplasm that could be better adapted to low nitrogen. So they were comparing low nitrogen at the site in Kiboko, for example, in eastern Kenya, with high nitrogen in the same season. And all the indicators of aflatoxin were much better in the nitrogen, more nitrogen treated plots. So there were like fewer than half the maize entries of the 123 maize entries tested were toxic compared, were over the legal limit for aflatoxin in the high nitrogen treatment compared to the low nitrogen treatment. So then more recently, we've done a couple of studies relating the amount of aflatoxin in people's food samples collected at local hammer mills in one case Kenya, the other case Tanzania, and we were able to predict the amount of aflatoxin in samples for a given mill based on the amount of soil organic matter and the soil moisture in that area around that mill. So it's not a perfect prediction by any means, but it's quite striking that soil health predicts aflatoxin accumulation using this sort of remotely sensed data. And proximally sensed data looking at the cornmeal as well. So the basic idea is that to be healthy, plants need water and nutrients and soil organic carbon. And if they are healthy, they're able to resist the mycotoxigenic fungus aspergillus here. But when climate stress or other factors reduce the amount of water and nutrients available to the plant, it gets stressed out, and then it becomes vulnerable to these fungi. So the question then arises, where are we going to get these nutrients, where we're going to get the carbon that we need to protect plants in order to both produce enough food, sort of quantitatively enough food, and then qualitatively the healthy food that's not toxic with these fungal toxins. So it really hit me hard that container-based sanitation that allows for source separation of the material and circular economy recovery of the value from that resource is both a chance to build better plants and healthier plant growth environments and soil amendments and whatnot, but it's also a chance to as you are holding the excreta for a period during that process, it's an opportunity to monitor things like COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, or mycotoxins, or other indicators of community health and the need for treatment. So if you're thinking about this mobilization of human-derived nutrients, you have to think differently depending on the scale of the proposition. So I personally are sort of very interested in this ultra-local neighborhood and municipal mobilization, and the thinking has to be a bit different from when you're thinking very locally versus when you're thinking of moving nutrients from an urban to a rural area, or if you're thinking about the global fertilizer trade because of the need to concentrate the nutrients for those longer range movements. Thinking here for a minute about the ultra-local usage, the context there is that you have carbon from crop residues coming from the rural areas, and you have excreta coming from the urban areas. And so the idea is that for that peri-urban region, you could tap both of those organic underutilized resources, or ours, to produce food even in areas where you have soil that might be full of heavy metals or whatnot. So that's kind of the proposition we're most interested there, using the nutrients in the excreta to compost the surplus crop residues. So for example, people in peri-urban informal settlements are doing a lot of the sort of raised beds gardening in African peri-urban zones. But the soils, unfortunately, that they're using tend to be contaminated by heavy metals and other inorganic pollutants. So the idea is we're trying to promote is to use properly handled these organic underutilized resources, including excreta and other things, to build plant growth media for these environments. So we've done some experiments on this in upstate New York, using cereal residues, chopped corn stover in this case, as a carbon source, using compost, biochar, and urine treatments. And we found that urine obviously improves yield in these sorts of experiments. And we also found that biochar improved both water holding capacity and yield in these initial experiments. So we're continuing to develop the theme, looking at salt accumulation and various other issues to do with the physical, chemical, and biological characteristics of these plant growth media. So thinking about going into the longer range mobilization of these nutrients, we have to think differently again about the urban-rural movement of material and also the global fertilizer trade. And this figure from a recent paper from Patti et al. Illustrates the idea that you can combine biochar, using biochar as one means by which you can bring carbon and the nutrients from urine together to produce fertilizers that capture the nutrients from urine, and with the biochar, you've thermally processed the poop basically to make it safe and light. So that's the general idea that we're working on. So we've also been working to get the message out. I interacted with a New York Times reporter recently, and she put out an article about pea cycling. This was in June of this year. And immediately once that article came out, it seemed to trigger a whole bunch of other articles bringing out the similar themes. So that was nice to see that the message is getting coming a little bit more into the mainstream. And one of the articles that came out in that period in June of this year was about the work that was done by a farmer organization in Niger, Fumogaskia, funded by the program that I worked for a number of years and now supports our work on the circular bionutrient economy. It was really great to see this group of farmers from Maradi, Niger, who have pioneered in their locality the use of human urine as a fertilizer, getting this kind of publicity, and particularly because they were, for me, my own inspiration for getting into this area of work. I think they've been very brave and productive. They've published their work with hundreds of farmers showing the benefits of using human urine as a fertilizer. So just wrapping up, we breathe oxygen from plants, and they take in the CO2 that we breathe out. Plants provide us with carbohydrates and complex carbon and protein, nitrogen molecules, and we release simpler molecules that can feed plants. So they breathe for us, we breathe for them. They feed us, we can feed them. And my dream would be if we would systematically do that in such a way that we capture the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium from urine, the carbon from feces, and also use biological agents to produce soil amendments that can not only feed plants and feed the soil, but also prevent the mycotoxin problem. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your attention. Bye.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for a very informative presentation, and where you highlighted the massive carbon and nutrient depletion for much of these world soils and how to improve it, and demonstrating the principle of grow as you go. Very interesting, and I trust you will be available for questions after the 5 speakers. Our next speaker is Dr. Marco Arsieri, Vice President Honoraire of the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage. Marco, I give you the floor. Marco, can I just for a moment, I saw now that Graziella Metternich have joined us from Australia, and we would like her to say a few words. Graziella, welcome. And we have already started with the first presentation, as you have seen. So please, if you could give us some words. Thank you very much, Graziella.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and my sincere apologies for technology always works, less at the time that you're short of time and you need to begin. Thank you, everybody. I'm Graziella Metternich. I'm Dean of Science at Western Sydney University in Sydney, and it's my absolutely pleasure to be listening to these presentations today, but also to have worked with the team of FAO and my co-chairs in the preparation of these 2 sessions, which are highly significant for the central theme of the conference, and also on the interlinkages between sustainable crop production, but also the needs for sustainable resource management, and as the themes of this session said, the efficiency and the resilience aspect. So I hope you enjoy all the presentations, and thank you very much, Felix, for being available to be there in person.
Thank you very much, Graziella, and I trust you will be able to attend the full 2 sessions. Will that be possible?
I'm not so sure. I need to check the timings because I have a very early start here in Sydney. It's a bit, we are heading towards nighttime. So I'm going to stay as much as I can.
Good, but after this first session, we will give you opportunity also to give us some of your impressions and provide us with some guidance. Thank you very much, Graziella. Then back to Dr. Marco Arsieri. Thank you, Marco. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Good morning, everyone, distinguished guests, participants, attendees, colleagues. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about optimizing water use in irrigation. So I will just share my screen. Yes. Okay, so what is it about optimizing water use in irrigations? First step is to have two new forms of governance. That's the most important aspect. So this means understanding the true value of water. So coming to, for instance, to the great important issue of management of the transboundary water governance. This means more and more having the opportunity to share water in river basins, aquifers, pursue legal frameworks for international cooperation, and establish joint institutions. Of course, this also means having a better governance, also means to adopt common standards for water data collection, for sharing, and for analysis, especially on transboundary waters. Very important aspect coming to governance is to properly define water property, which means access rights and entitlements for farmers. And of course, the big issue of recovering costs for the delivery of water to agriculture. In many countries all around the world, the farmers are only covering the operation and maintenance part of the full water supply cost. So, but evidence has shown that in countries that have raised the issue of water charges, evidence has indicated that water use efficiency has been improving rather than reducing the outputs. Of course, there's also much to do. We can do a lot in raising efficiency in the phase of water conveyance and distribution. This means during the delivery phase from the water source, in the phase of the water reaching the farm, at the farm level, and of course, efficiency in the distribution on the field. So, main solutions, we all know about this, is proper canal lining, waterproofing, replacement, of course, of earth canals with pipelines, restoration of the infrastructures, and use of long duration and low maintenance pipelines. All of this put together can really bring practically to a higher efficiency which ranges between 20 and 30%. That's a lot of resources that can be saved. Of course, also efficiency in irrigation systems. That's another very important aspect. Because irrigation systems can have very different application efficiencies with significant effects on yield, quality of crop production, and of required operating pressure, which means money. So we can start with flooding irrigation system, flooding fields which have 25 to 30% of efficiency. Gravity systems like surface flow fire irrigation, 40 to 50% of efficiency. Traditional sprinkling irrigation systems, 60 to 75%. Modern center pivot reaching 80% of efficiency. And of course, micro-irrigation and especially subsurface micro-irrigation, which can reach peaks of efficiency up to 90%. As you can see, of course, given that all the problems with subsurface micro-irrigation and micro-irrigation are resolved. Of course, the new frontier is ultra-low drip irrigation, which can reach efficiency up to 95%. When we compare traditional micro-irrigation, this is an experiment that has been carried out in the northern part, for instance, of Italy, you can see that there is useful water, of course, but there's also a significant amount of water which is lost. On the other hand, when we are dealing with ultra-low drip irrigation, the only water that is provided to the plants is useful. So this is a very important aspect. Why? Why is this? Because flow is very, very low. We are talking about 0.1 to 0.3 liters per hour. We have a longer period of water release, very low water tension in the soil, no percolation, excellent water saving. And these are some slides that can show, for instance, if we look at the evolution in time of water tension in the soil, when we provide 70% of evapotranspiration, 20 centimeters and 50 centimeters, you can see that the evidence has shown that the soil moisture level is going down, but it's very, very slow. On the other hand, with traditional drip irrigation, the steepness is much more evident. And of course, water use efficiency is much, much higher. If we compare ultra-low drip irrigation with traditional drip irrigation, when we provide 70% of the evapotranspiration, so that means minus 30% of the seasonal volume, we have the same yield, so we have higher water use efficiency, whereas with traditional drip irrigation, production is, on average, is 20% less. Of course, we can also have higher efficiency in irrigation scheduling. This is very important. This is probably the most important aspect to consider when we are dealing with irrigation, because it defines the correct frequency and duration of watering. So that means how much water to apply into the field. The purpose of having proper irrigation scheduling is to maximize the irrigation efficiency, thus water resources use, applying the exact amount of water that is needed to replenish the soil moisture which is lost because of crop evapotranspiration and of the evaporative demand of the environment. So, proper irrigation scheduling can really save water and energy, and especially can save money. There are several expert systems. How to properly manage irrigation scheduling. There are several expert systems all around the world. There are many examples. They can provide, usually they provide farmers information on parameters such as the irrigation volume, of course, the irrigation frequency, when do I have to irrigate, how much time I have to wait for the next irrigation. And of course, which is very important, sometimes these expert systems can also suggest the threshold defining the economic convenience for irrigation. So this is another important aspect. And after the first login from the farmers, the inputs are automatically assigned by the system. Of course, these expert systems require a whole lot of information, such as meteorological data, soil maps, water table depth, crops data, user data, and soil, of course, also soil sensors are required. So the irrigation advice can be very easily accessed by internet, or it can be delivered by messages directly sent to the farmers. On the other hand, the irrigation service providers need, of course, to have and to acquire georeferenced data on the irrigated areas, and they will provide all the information requested on irrigation intervals and on the conditions for irrigations. As I said, the farmer can have direct access by internet to the server of the irrigation service provider on the website, or he is provided, in this case you see here, he is provided with a password, and so he will receive on his laptop, on his cellular phone or wherever, he will receive day by day, whenever is needed, the irrigation advice concerning his farm. On the other hand, the user will access the service introducing georeference data on his farm on Google Maps, for instance, and the system will automatically provide up-to-date information on the irrigated area, on the meteorological conditions, on water table, and on soil characteristics. In this particular case, this is called IRIFRAME, but there are so many all around the world. We can say this expert system improve by all means irrigation scheduling. They can increase quantity and quality of agricultural production. In this example here, you can see irrigation scheduling provided by experience of the farmer, of course, and on the other hand, provided by advice, such as this expert system, which is called IRIFRAME, has provided 30% more of yield and a higher water use efficiency. There has been a saving of almost 30% of water. So the water use efficiency provided by the experience of the farmers reached on average 17 kilos per cubic meter of water, and on the other hand, with this irrigation advice, expert systems, the water use efficiency has been much higher, almost 50% more. So that means, in the end, that means almost something ranging between 15 to 25% of water saved, of course, depending on the area, on the conditions, on the soil structure, on the soil characteristics, and so on. But this is something very, I think, worthwhile considering in order to have a maximization of water use, of water resources use on general. And so with this, I thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco Arcieri, for highlighting and providing us with the insight of understanding the true value of water through the different aspects. Of course, the governance, as you have pointed out, efficiency of water conveyance and distribution, and then focusing on the last part, which is very important in terms of the efficiency in irrigation systems through the different methodologies and techniques that are being applied. Let us ask the audience to write down your answer or your questions, as well as our online participants, and send it through that we could put it forward to our presenters. Our next speaker is Professor Fusu Xiang, Professor Chief Scientist of Plant Nutrition, Professor China Agricultural University, member of the Chinese Academy of Engineering in China. And Professor Zhang sent us a video of his presentation.
It is my pleasure to talk about improved nutrient management to increase crop productivity and sustainability. I'm Fusu Zhang from China Agricultural University. Today, I would like to talk about first the importance of nutrient management for food production, and then go to topic how to realize food security and sustainability simultaneously. Then I will give some prospects. It took several hundred years to realize the dream of the food self-sufficiency of China. Only until 1998, China could feed itself. Therefore, the food security issue is not only China's issue, but a global issue, because we have a very large population, 1.4 billion people. If they are hungry, that will be a problem for global. Chemical fertilizer play an important role to increase crop productivity by improve crop growth and increase crop yield. Like photo show here that by use nitrogen phosphor fertilizer, you can improve crop growth tremendously. Therefore, farmers think fertilizer is a good thing. They try to use fertilizer more and more. In last decades, the grain production in China increased by threefold, but the chemical fertilizer consumption increased by 20-fold. You can see the chemical fertilizer consumption increased very much compared to grain production. There's no wonder that the overuse of nutrients, which not be taken up by crops, go into environment, cause environmental problem like leak nutrification. The nutrification situation become worse and worse along the increased consumption of chemical fertilizer in China. Therefore, how to realize high crop productivity and reduce environmental pollution become the issue for China. The idea picture is we have to increase crop productivity continuously, but reduce nutrient input and increase nutrient use efficiency and reduce pollution. That means if we are able to increase crop productivity and improve the environmental sustainability at the same time, we will have double win. That is idea for food security and environmental sustainability. How to realize food security and environmental sustainability simultaneously. At least we need 2 steps to realize that. The first, develop technology to solve the problem. Then disseminating technology to large area to make change. We have been developing double high technology, high crop productivity, and high nutrient use efficiency by following 3 principles. First, optimization of nutrient input. Take all possible sources of nutrients into consideration. Secondly, match nutrient supply with crop requirement, spatially and temporally. Thirdly, increase crop yield significantly by optimize variety, density, planting data, and field management technology. Use this principle to develop double high technology. We were able to have success in major grain production area in China in 2014. By use this technology, we can increase productivity by more than 30%, reduce greenhouses, reduce nutrient losses by more than 50%, realize food security and environmental stability. How to disseminate this technology in larger area to make change? We develop platform, means that we develop and disseminate double high technology to realize food security and environmental sustainability simultaneously. Go to million smallholder farmers, work with farmers together in zero distance, zero time limit, zero charge, and zero personnel selection throughout whole production processes. In China, we have established more than 480 STBs, cover all the crops and cropping system. We doing field demonstration with farmers together. We organize farmers field school. We doing indoor and outdoor trainings for farmer, and we doing experimental in the field with farmer together. In different way, we try to disseminate our technology to farmer, ask them to use double high technology to make on-ground change. One example is in Quzhou County, we have achieved double high in grain production because in Quzhou County, we have about 90,000 household smallholder farmers. They use double high technology to increase productivity and improve nutrient use efficiency and increase the farmers' income at the same time. In China, we could extend our technology with 20 million smallholder farmers together. We are able to increase crop productivity by 11% and reduce nitrogen rates by 60% and improve nutrient efficiency by more than 30%. In that way, we are able to get a successful story in China. That is reduce input and increase crop productivity, ensure food security while reduce pollution. Now, I would like to give some perspectives. We have enormous potential to increase crop productivity worldwide. You see, like in Africa, because there is no enough nutrients input there, the productivity is very low. And in Asia, they use manure and some part of nutrient input, so the productivity is higher than in Africa. In developing countries like in EU or in North America, the productivity is much higher. We have great potential globally to increase the productivity of rice, wheat, maize in order to ensure food security globally. But at the same time, we are able to improve the nutrient and water use efficiency, reduce environmental pollution. If we are able to increase crop productivity, increase resources use efficiency, reduce pollution, at the same time, we will have modern intensive agriculture. In that way, we are able to ensure food security and environmental sustainability for the global. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Fuzhou Shang, for highlighting the importance of improving nutrient management to increase crop production. And of course, the sustainability by developing high technology and pointing out of the enormous potential with nutrient management. Unfortunately, Professor Shang will not be with us till the end due to the time difference, but we will then move on to our next speaker, and that is Joseph Garvey, the Executive Director, Sahara Sahel Foods. And he will present online. So Joseph, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very honored and happy to be among you here. And it's an interesting conference to follow as well. So I'm Joseph Garvey. I'm the founder and the executive director of a social enterprise in Sahara Sahel Foods. And we're working in Niger Republic, which is a mainly desert country. It's mixed between the Sahara and the Sahel. And therefore, the agriculture in our country is very dryland based and mainly rain-fed. And I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities that the native flora, the wild trees, and the indigenous plants of our country can offer. Typically, when we look at our Sahelian environment at the drylands, we see this parched landscape that doesn't look all that impressive. The trees look short and they're scrubby, they're spiny, and it doesn't look like it holds a lot of value or productive potential. And typically, we will see it mainly as being good for firewood or for animal fodder. So in order to grow food through the last 1.5 centuries, we've been busy clearing scrubland and making farmland. And that has led to a major negative ecological consequences in terms of loss of biodiversity, in terms of increased soil erosion, etc. What we often forget is that a lot of these native trees that we've been clearing are actually valuable food plants that have been known for millennia by the local populations, but that have been forgotten and gone to underuse. So we have dozens of different good food plants, from the genera of the Boscias, from the Grevias, from the Vitexes, the Sisyphuses, and many more, the Concretums, and many more. And an interesting fact with these food plants is that you only need to combine a few of these plants to already have broad range of nutrients that you're being able to cover. Like on this picture, we see some fruits of Sisyphus mauritiana, some Balanitis egyptiaca, some seeds of Boscia senegalensis, and leaves of Cisbania leptocarpa and Meirua crassifolia. And we can see that we are already covering a very large range of interesting and valuable nutrients. And if we look into more detail on this, we realize that these nutritional properties are often really excellent. For example, in Niger, we are a protein deficient country. So a lot of people need more proteins in their diets. And we can see that the seeds of Boscia senegalensis contain 22% protein and contain all of the 8 essential amino acids, of which 6 are covered to levels equal or greater than the recommended WHO standard. We can see that for the leaves of Crateva adansoni, or for the leaves from Meirua crassifolia, or again the leaves of the annual plant Cisbania leptocarpa, we're actually covering potentially all 8 essential amino acids at rates equal or greater to the recommended WHO standard. And the same goes for vitamins. In terms of vitamin C, we can see the fruits of the Adansonia digitata, the baobab, are extremely concentrated, rich in vitamin C. But the same goes for the fruits of Sisyphus mauritiana or the fruits of Sclerocardia pirea, the marula. We see it with important minerals like iron that are very abundant in the fruits of Grevia tenax or in the leaves of Meirua crassifolia. And the same for iodine, which we can find in the leaves of Boscia salicifolia. And basically, whether it's vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin B, whether it's calcium, iron, and so forth, most of the essential nutrients are well covered. If it's about fats, we have the seeds of Balanitis egyptiaca, which are rich in very good, high-quality fatty acids. So we're basically looking at very wholesome and good foods. And they're also very productive. If we compare, for example, the Boscia senegalensis, the Hansa, with the classic rain-fed crop millet, which is the main crop in our area, we see that we have a productivity that is more than 2 times as high on per occupied space. And we see that we have a protein content that is twice as high. And we see that it's not the only species with good productivity. Grevia tenax, growing in very dry areas, produces 600 to 700 kilos per hectare, which compares to the millet of 480 kilograms per hectare. The Sisyphus spina Christi produces up to 200 kilograms of fruits per tree per year, and is able to produce nectar for 3.5 kilograms of honey before producing the fruits from those trees. And the Neocaria macrophylla can go as far as producing 400 kilograms of fruits per tree per year. So when we're removing trees in order to make space for crops to make food, we're actually removing a richer food source in order to give place to a lesser food source. Another interesting fact is that if we combine enough different species and have biodiversity in an area, we have activity and harvests for all seasons of the year, not only for the end of the rainy season, which is typically September, October, and beginning November, the typical harvest season, but we have different species to harvest in every season of the calendar year. And from these traditional plants, we can develop a lot of modern food products. We can develop things that are based on tradition. Like at the bottom right corner here, you see salt extracted from the leaves of Salvadora persica, but also completely new products. Like on the bottom left, you see plant-based milk from the Balanitis egyptiaca seeds, which is a new product and innovation, or popped Hansa seeds from the Boscia senegalensis on the top left. So by combining all the new trees, all the new uses, we can create new markets for these foods. And by doing so, we can involve thousands of smallholders into the process of harvesting these fruits, seeds, and leaves, and creating income for them in areas where people are very resource poor. So taking almost any kind of landscape, in Niger. If we look at it closer, we'll find scattered in those landscapes trees that are of food value and that can be brought to market. And therefore, even the most remote areas and places where economists usually see very little opportunity for economic development, we can create new value chains and new activity. This in turn encourages the rural population, mainly the women we are working with, to engage in protecting the trees and propagating them. And therefore, we are getting ecological benefits in terms of binding more carbon and protecting biodiversity and fighting against desertification. So when you look at landscapes that degraded, like the one on this picture, quite often nowadays, if you take a closer look, you'll find that they're gradually being filled up with shoots of young and new trees. And these skills are being passed on from generation to generation. In closing, I'm showing you this picture of a woman who's with her grandson and a tree that she taught her grandson to sow when he was small. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for that excellent information regarding the use of forgotten trees by producing food and support in terms of food security by leveraging local knowledge and biodiversity. I trust you will be with us to the end for some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I trust we will receive some online and from the audience some questions. Our next speaker, and that is the last speaker for this first session of 4.1, and that is Chuki Nanjundaswamy. She's a member, International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty, and she will present online. She do not have a PowerPoint presentation, but she will just talk us through. So Chuki, we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much. Respected Chair and all the dignitaries and the participants of this very important conference at a very important juncture when the nature has actually called for an emergency. As Mr. Chair has already informed, I do not have either a PowerPoint or an abstract to share with you. I will be mostly spontaneous and speaking through my experience. The topic which has been given to me is about co-creation of knowledge between farmers and researchers. So, as I already said, I come from India, and I basically live in the southern part of India in a state called Karnataka. And let me share with you what's happening here from the last couple of years with climate change. Last year, our state alone has lost 40% of agricultural produce, and this year we have never experienced summer. We have only seen monsoon and monsoon and monsoon. And now this is the season we should be entering to winter, and we are still receiving rains. And what we have seen is that in just one district alone, where farmers are doing rain-fed farming, mostly growing maize and cotton, and particularly BT cotton, transgenic cotton. In the last 10 months, we have lost 118 farmers to suicides because of the crop losses and because of increasing of the deaths and many other factors. I'm starting my presentation with these facts, not with any analysis or evaluations or critiques, because nature has actually called for called for an emergency, and co-creation of knowledge is not just one subject before us. We have one of the biggest blunder I think we have created, we have contributed, is because of our approach to agriculture. Agriculture cannot afford to have this approach of departments. Soil health and climate change and plant health, plant production, these are all not different departments. Unless we have a holistic approach and we learn to do agriculture, we learn to do farming in harmony with nature, and understanding the nature, is just not possible to survive. The global south is basically an agrarian part of the world where a majority of the population are small scale food producers. They may be small scale farmers, or they may be doing small scale fisheries, or landless people, or pastoralists. So these are the people who are directly hit by the climate change. And unless we have, a very honest and transparent approach to keep the food production going on, because, the Sustainable Development Goals talk about food security. But what we in the social movements and in the, in La Via Campesina, which I'm part of, which is the Global Farmers Movement, talks about is the food sovereignty. And unless we fight for the food sovereignty and we decide what we want to grow, how we want to grow in a decentralized manner, because agroclimatic zones are decentralized. Agroclimatic zones are not centralized and cannot be controlled by one corporation, cannot be controlled by one organization. So the researchers and farmers not only have to come together, but we also have to learn and create knowledge from our, the generation which was born before Green Revolution. Understand Green Revolution has given a lot of contribution to secure food in the world. But at the same time, we have lost the crop diversity, we have lost the agriculture diversity, we have lost the beautiful agricultural or the farm systems, because of Green Revolution. And let us not forget that this is a historical mistake that we have reached for our existential crisis. And unless we learn from our ancestors, unless we learn from the indigenous people who still live in coordination and in harmony with nature, we cannot co-create the knowledge just with the researchers and just with the present generation of farmers. Because the present generation of farmers, who have reached the stage of committing suicide, they are all the followers of the Green Revolution, which propagated monoculture, which basically destroyed the diversity, and people who just depended on one crop like maize, or one crop like sugarcane, or one crop like cotton, they are actually killing themselves. And people who have done multiple cropping in their farm, they are the one who are surviving, and this is called agroecology. Agroecology is actually inviting the farmers and the rural as well as the urban people back to the countryside, back to farming, whereas monoculture based agricultural system is basically pushing the farmers away. So we need to create a space where there is a mutual and mutually respected, mutually acknowledged space where co-creation of knowledge can really take place. Otherwise, what we have seen all these years is that co-creation of knowledge is not actually co-creation of knowledge. It's actually, teaching of the laboratory knowledge to the farmers who have been, living on the field, depending for their livelihoods on the farm. So this is what I have to say. And thanks for giving me the opportunity, and thanks for inviting IPC and Via Campesina to be part of this very important conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chuki, for highlighting the co-creation of knowledge between farmers and researchers. I'm sure there will be some questions coming your way. That then conclude all the presentations. And we have got online my co-chair, Shami, that are Singore, and I trust he can talk. Shami, yeah, I can see you. So maybe just introduce yourself and give us some impressions, and I'll ask you to make some concluding remarks at the end. So just some impressions after introducing yourself. Thank you, Shami.
Yes, thank you very much, Felix. It's been a great pleasure to be engaged as a co-chair. It's a real pity that I couldn't make it to Rome due to logistical challenges, but nevertheless, it's been really insightful to have a great start to the session this morning, and listening to the speakers address very pertinent issues for sustainability of global agricultural systems, mostly looking at the scope for improving natural resource management sustainability, and also paying more attention to more efficient use of water and natural resources. I think we cannot understate the critical role of enhancing resource use efficiencies as the global population continues to grow and we continue to face the multiple environmental and social, as well as some of the food security challenges. And I'm very delighted to hear some of the very innovative contributions that came in this morning. And what we need to continue to reflect on is how we can translate this into actions that go beyond talking and achieve the much needed urgent interventions for addressing the major challenges that the globe faces today. Thank you so much, Felix.
Thank you very much, Shami. And then you might have noticed that here in front table, there are other people also sitting with me. Of course, Marco was the presenter, but on my left-hand side, on your right-hand side, Emma, that is the support here from the FAO, Emma Slip-Prandi, and then also Marcelo Quantanero, and there on the far right, Antonio. Antonio, thank you very much for handling all the metrimeter in terms of the questions that are coming through. And I would like to ask Marcela just to introduce also yourself and your impressions. Marcela, please.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, I'm Marcela Quintero. I work for the CGIAR, leading a new initiative in agroecology. And I also work at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, two CGIAR centers, and I'm the Associate Director for Research and Innovation there. On my impressions, and probably more as some quick remarks on what I have heard today, is that, first of all, I would like to say from the agronomic perspective, I think we have seen today many cases that show that it's completely possible to increase the efficiency in the use of water, in the use of nutrients like nitrogen. So that's possible. But also would like to highlight that now the challenge is not only to increase that efficiency for purposes of crop production, but also to reduce environmental damage. That was the case of China. So it's how we start talking more about inputs use efficiency also in the context of the environmental challenges that we face today. And then with that, I would like also to highlight one of the slides where were presented the different the pressure points in each region. So for example, there are regions where there is not use of inputs. So there the challenge is how to increase productivity, but also the challenge is, yes, if we need to increase productivity there, let's do it now, learning from other regions that already did that at expense of environmental cost. So how we learn from that to avoid that the increase in the use of inputs in areas where there is low application of inputs is done in a correct way to avoid environmental damage, as has been happening in other regions, as in the case of China that we saw today. So acknowledging that there are different transition pathways and that is a good momentum to learn from how the transition pathway could happen in a way that is not bad for the environment. The other thing on water efficiency, we saw today the availability of technologies to increase water use efficiency, and also on expert systems to increase decision making on the water use. And I think there is an incredible opportunity there to use these expert systems, not only to use more efficiently the water, but how, for example, those monitoring systems as eReframe can also help us to monitor how water use efficiency can change with different management practices and so on. I think there is a great opportunity there. And before, and I think very important, is the two last presentations has shown that this increase in the productivity of inputs should be seen also in a broader context and how to reflect on what is at stake when we increase productivity. So how, for instance, we avoid the loss of biodiversity that is important for nutrition, important for new sources of revenues, and then it's not anymore this dichotomy between increasing productivity and biodiversity loss, but how we can find a middle ground there, and acknowledging that more biodiversity in farming systems is good also to protect the adaptation capacity of our farmers, and especially of our small farmers. So with that, those are my first impression, and at least the take-home messages that I take from what I heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcella. That is almost an excellent, or it is an excellent summary of what has been presented this morning. Are there any questions from the audience that you would like to put forward? We have the one here on the podium, Dr. Marco Arcieri, and then, of course, the others online. Any questions? There's one. If you could just press the button there in front of you, say who you are, and then pose the question, please.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, and thanks for the presentations. My question is to Marco Arcieri. In terms of the level of investment needed for the eReframe technology, there's a lot of data that goes into making the system work. What is the level of investment for that?
Yes, thank you for this question. Actually, these expert systems usually are run by irrigation service providers. So most of the information, meteorological data, soil data, and so on, are usually provided by extension services, by local governments. Usually this kind of data should be available, but they are available. So the real issue there is to put together this incredible amount of data, which is most of the time is available, and have these servers running. So I wouldn't say it really is very, very expensive for an administration, for an irrigation agency. The real point is to convince farmers to be part of this service. So what happens is that provided that you are receiving water from agency, from irrigation service providers, the problem, I think, in my experience, the real issue is to convince the farmer that he has to take advantage of these services, of these irrigation advices, because experience has shown that you can save water and you can increase water productivity. And so, I mean, it's not very, of course, we are talking about the 45% of food production coming from irrigated areas. The whole question is about rain-fed irrigation. Of course, is out of this issue. But I think it's not that much really expensive for an irrigation agency. It's not that much to, and the farmer will be paying an annual fee, which is very, very cheap, and he will receive all this information, timely information, when to irrigate, how much water, and they are more and more convinced with experience. As time goes by, they are more and more convinced to participate and to join, to have this irrigation advice.
Thank you, Marco. We got several questions here online. The first one is to Joseph Garvey. The question, Joseph, you mentioned native food trees like balanites, Aegyptiaca are found in the Sahel, and new value chains can be created. How are you working to make them economically profitable? I trust I pronounced that tree, balanites, Aegyptiaca. Joseph, please.
Thank you. The Balanites aegyptiaca is indeed a very interesting value chain. There are a couple of issues that need to be sorted out at first. The first one we had to work on was the stigmatization that has existed, that food from wild plants would be lesser foods or less good than, say, food from modern cropping systems. So that's the first thing we had to address in our social enterprise, and which we have addressed quite successfully. Nowadays, even top restaurants and top hotels are interested in serving these foods, whilst when we were beginning, it was considered as famine foods. So to make a profitable value chain, you first need to break that social stigmatization and bring these foods back to their proper value. When you've done so, what we do is we create a system of smallholders where the smallholders bring their produce to us, and then we process it and then we market it. And it's about identifying valuable products to make from them, and then about building and growing those markets. And those are new markets. It's not like, well, we just bring it to an existing market and then we sell it. No, we have to work on introducing these foods, convincing partners and customers to want to use these foods. And that's something that grows gradually and that grows efficiently when it's well done. So much of the job is down to doing marketing properly, doing good logistics. And part of the challenges is also operating in a country where the tax burden is relatively heavy and the infrastructures are poor. So making it economically viable in that context is challenging to a certain extent, but it's workable, and it's gradually working. It's not working for all products yet, but for some products already, we see that we are able to produce them profitably, and we keep working on the other ones to make those logistical elements and so forth work as well.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Chucky, we got a question for you, and that is, how can we make traditional knowledge and practices be considered by policymakers and make agriculture planning and investment processes be screened on using indigenous knowledge? Just unmute yourself, Chucky. Did you hear the question, Chucky?
Yes. It was not very clear to me. If you don't mind, can you please repeat
Okay,
it?
let me repeat it. How can we make traditional knowledge and practices be considered by policy makers and make agriculture planning and investment processes be screened on using indigenous knowledge?
First of all, I think, to be frank, the policymakers have to be free from the private players. So the policymakers, we don't have very, unfortunately, we don't have very committed policymakers in power. No matter which country we are talking about. The reality is the agri business is actually controlling the agriculture departments in most of the countries. So agriculture ministers and other policymakers who are part of, who are concerned about agriculture should start looking at the indigenous knowledge, not from the profit motive, but from keeping agriculture and the farming community or the food producers community to survive on on the land and on and to continue food producing. So there should be an openness, an open-mindedness to look at it, and there should be a clear intention. There should not be a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuki. We then got a last question here for Dr. Marco Arcieri. Although there were a similar question already asked from the audience, and that is, of course, the availability of the software ERIFrame. But the question online is, how much does the installation of a new drip irrigation system cost? And maybe you can say something about the water quality, and if you would like to add on to that, the principles of water productivity and water use efficiency. Thank you, Dr. Arcieri.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. First of all, one clear point, we need to make a clear point. Drip irrigation systems are not cheap to buy, and they're not cheap to run. So, on average, to my experience, a newly planned drip irrigation system can range between something like $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000 per hectare on average. That's my experience. But of course, depending on the amount of technology you want to put inside, if you add fertigation systems and so on, and all that is necessary to, like for instance, to increase efficiency, you can easily raise up to $10,000 per hectare. So it is not, for sure, it is not a cheap irrigation system to use, and it's also quite energy demanding, requires a lot of skill, and requires money to be run. But, of course, as we have seen, as experience shows, it can really be very effective in reducing water losses, reducing percolation, and increasing water use efficiency. Water use efficiency and water productivity, I think that was the issue. Of course, it's two slightly different concepts, because water use efficiency refers to the amount of water that is efficiently used overall, the total, so that's a percentage, actually. When we talk instead, on the other hand, about water productivity, that refers to the amount of dry mass which is produced per single cubic meter of water. So that's a value. So that is usually it's kilograms of dry mass produced per cubic meter or per liter, whatever it is. Water quality, of course, is a top issue, especially when we are dealing with low pressure irrigation systems, because we need to have high quality water, of course, in order to prevent. I said in my presentation that these systems can be very, very effective, very useful for increasing water use efficiency, provided that all the problems linked to water quality, to water logging, to water clogging of the drip irrigators are solved. So, of course, what is now available as new technology, there's these tapes, rather than traditional lines of drip irrigators, there's this new technique, this new technology, which is the drip irrigators are self-compensating. They are placed along tapes rather than lines. They can be put underneath the soil, but of course they require a lot of maintenance, they require some interventions. I think that overall, of course, where and when there is financial availability, we should be striving, we should be suggesting always to go for low pressure irrigation systems, which is what is happening in the Mediterranean. Farmers and service irrigation providers, of course, and governments are progressively shifting from canals to pressurized systems, because that's the way ahead. There is no doubt about that. Of course, on the other side, policymakers and governments should be investing a lot of money. It is happening. They should be investing, they should be financially support farmers to have the proper skill, the proper training in order to acquire these systems, to run them properly, and of course also to buy these systems. So that, I think, that's the new frontier, you know, if we want to save water, if we want to increase efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco. Maybe returning to Shami, the co-chair. Shami, you are working for the African Plant Nutrition Institute, and in the current fertilizer crisis, how can your institute help, for instance, and working together with smallholder farmers to achieve sustainable production? And maybe after that, some concluding remarks from you.
Yes, thank you very much, Felix. Yeah, I think what, come up as a very pertinent issue, under the current turbulent global, fertilizer and food security crisis, is the whole essential need for improving and increasing nutrient use. So we have actually noticed, I just wanted to speak, more generally, that there has been almost a 20 to 30% yield reduction due to limited access of fertilizers and higher cost of fertilizers as farmers scale back. So we cannot evade the need to ensure that we deal with the problems of improving access to nutrients. They are essential, and the options are limited in immediate, supporting increased productivity. But having said that, we still have the space to increase nutrient use efficiencies. And as a PNI, we are promoting what we call the 4R nutrient stewardship. And that's a framework that provides the basis for sustainable plant nutrition based on 4 key principles of using the right source of nutrients at the right rate, at the right time, and at the right place. So the second right, which is right rate, it has to be addressed, and that requires multi-stakeholder investments to ensure that there is the right investment that help to buffer the current challenges that farmers have in affordability and access to fertilizers. But then there are 3 other rights of source, time, and place are areas where we can make and drive the change for improving nutrient use efficiency. And by deploying the 4R, 4R nutrient stewardship, we have clearly demonstrated that we can double the efficiency. Because currently, despite the low nutrient application rate in Africa, we are still operating at about 14 agronomic efficiency, which is 14 kgs of grain in maize areas per kilogram of nitrogen, and that's less than half of the agronomic efficiency that can be attained with optimal nutrient management. So we have the scope to just double productivity by more efficient utilization of resources. Then I also wanted to emphasize the need for integrated solutions. I think the presentation, by Professor Zhang clearly showed that it's not single technologies that are needed to project us toward the more sustainable nutrient use efficiency, but integrated solutions that combine resources, external resources, internal resources, organic resources are very essential for increasing efficiency. Then the other piece I wanted to also highlight, which is very much a key area where we are making investments in, is the whole area of crop diversification. By integrating legumes and other crops that reduce the demand for nitrogen, we are able to actually capitalize on natural processes that help to improve nutrient cycling in the system and provide a basis and foundation for more efficient use of nutrients. So that's those are key areas that I wanted to point out, from the perspective of what we are doing as the African Plant Nutrition Institute. So just a quick word in terms of some of the key messages that came through from the presentations this morning. I just wanted to highlight the issue of working towards credible, relevant, and legitimate technological development processes that fully engage farmers and the practitioners on the ground to ensure that the technological processes is fully inclusive and addresses the needs and the demands of the stakeholders. And by utilizing local knowledge, we are able to make our science to be more effective in addressing the challenges of improving efficiencies and working towards more sustainable natural resource management. And I wanted to also underscore the critical need to look at global challenges in terms of principles, but also adapt solutions at the local level. The context is very, very dynamic and highly variable. And as we look at all the technologies that were presented this morning, we are very context specific, and getting the right technologies in the right places and targeted to the right farmers is going to be key for translating a lot of the technologies and good science into relevant and practicable and actionable recommendations at the local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shami. That then brings us to the end of this session 4.1, where we had very rich and informative presentations by the 5 speakers, and also the contributions by the inputs that we received from online as well as here from Marcella. Thank you very much. And I would ask you to be back at 11 Central European Time for session 4.2, and that is ecosystem approaches to resilience. So we will have a break of half an hour, and then if you could be back at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much. The coffee is downstairs at level 0. there where the flags are in the lobby. Thank you.
Marcela is here, so you can give the floor to her and after.
Yeah.
And also Shani, etc.
Yeah.
As you want.
Okay. Well, welcome back to the Global Conference on Sustainable Plant Production in the Thematic Session 4 on Natural Resource Management. And this is then focusing on the ecosystem approaches to resilience. That is session 4.2. We had this morning the focus on the maximizing resource use efficiency, and complementing to that is now the ecosystem approaches to resilience. We had 5 speakers lined up for the presentations. Unfortunately, the last speaker, Nicholas Sharp, the Director Global Projects of Savory Institute, couldn't make it. So we will only have the 4 speakers. And without further ado, I would like to welcome the first speaker, and that is Lucas Garibaldi. He is a professor at Universidad Nacional de Rio Negro, Argentina, and is also director of the Institute of Natural Resources and Agroecologia in Argentina. And Lucas provided us with a video, so we are looking forward to his presentation. Over to Lucas. Thank you.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. Today I want to share with you how to design multifunctional landscapes. This is an example in Argentina where you can see on the top left the traditional way to crop with large monocultures. shown in squares. From the left to the right, from to the bottom, we start a process of going from homogeneous landscapes into multifunctional landscapes. And in that, hello, I'm very happy to be here. Today I want to share with you how to design multifunctional landscapes. This is an example in Argentina where you can see on the top left the traditional way to crop with large monocultures shown in squares. And from the left to the right, from the top to the bottom, we start a process of going from homogeneous landscapes into multifunctional landscapes. And in that process, we follow the topography of the land, the microenvironment, as you see on the bottom left, and then on the bottom right, you can see there also a biological corridor, restoration of natural and semi-natural habitat. This process, of course, is not end in 2022, but it will follow over the years. And the process itself, it means year after year increasing biodiversity and reducing the amount of external inputs. External input is everything that you use in the production process, and it is consumed in the production process, like fertilizers, pesticides, and the more of external inputs you use, the larger the environmental footprint of agriculture. So in this way, as I said, we try to create these kind of landscapes that increase biodiversity and reduce the use of external input. So, for example, the crops need the nutrients, and the nutrients you can obtain by improving the soil biodiversity and reducing the amount of fertilizers that you use in the land. So, one might think that multifunctional landscapes are not the common everywhere because they are less productive. So maybe an important barrier to transform from homogeneous landscapes into multifunctional landscape is the reduction of crop yield that the farmers obtain. However, we have been working intensively during 5 years with the FAO in all these blue points that you see in the map, mostly developing countries. In each one of these points, we call them crop systems. For example, the blue point in South Africa, it means sunflowers. So, for example, in South Africa, we have several fields of sunflowers that follow the conventional way of doing the crops within homogeneous landscapes, and the other half of the fields in sunflowers in South Africa started the process of creating these multifunctional landscapes in which we increase biodiversity and we reduce the amount of external inputs. And we did the same with different crops all over the world, mostly developing countries, which is most of the food is produced and travel to developing countries. And on the contrary to what we might think, we found that these crops within these multifunctional landscapes, they produce more food, on average 24% more. 24 is a lot. Of course, this is kind of an average of all the crops that we work with. For some crops was even bigger, the increase in crop yield in multifunctional landscapes, but for others it was less. But the important point is that never homogeneous landscape have less crop yield than a multifunctional landscape. In this particular case, in our study that we work with the real farmers from small holders to large holders, different type of crops. But in this case, our process of creating multifunctional landscapes, it was directed to increase the abundance and diversity of pollinators that move pollen within the crop and increase the amount of seed and fruit production. So what we found was astonishing, very important, in a way that all over the world we found a clear pattern of pollination deficit all over the world. And by improving the amount of pollen in the flowers, we can increase crop yield on average by 24%. So how is that homogeneous landscapes, as you see in this picture, they lack so much pollen? Well, like you see in the picture, pollination deficit is an imbalance between the pollination demand and the pollination offer. And you can see in the picture that with these large monocultures, we have a huge demand of pollen over a very short period. On the other side, by creating these large monocultures and using a lot of external inputs and agrochemical pesticides, we destroyed the habitat for the pollinators. Then we have a lot of demand and no offer, and as a result, there is a very clear pattern of pollination deficit all over the world, and this is something really important. This is a summary of many decades of experiments and studies published even in Science, and you can see here how crop yield varies as a function of the amount of pollinators. But the important thing is that there is not only one relation between yield and pollinators. You can see that the relation depends on the amount of biodiversity. And if you increase biodiversity, you are on the upper curve, so you have more productivity and more efficient pollination. So what we are finding is that biodiversity is an important aspect to conserve, to restore, and to manage within agricultural farms, not only because of biocultural reasons, because of the conservation of biodiversity, but also itself because of agronomic reasons and crop productivity. And biodiversity and pollinator biodiversity in particular, in this case that I'm using as an example, not only can increase short-term crop production, but also can create environments that are more stable in the amount of production over the years. And you can see here how the stability decrease from left to right, from the top to the bottom, when pollinator deficit increases. So we have more yield and more stability. So maybe multifunctional landscapes are not the most common thing all over the world because, okay, they can produce more, but they are less profitable because they have a lot of cost. On the contrary, we review this and we have that the profit is higher in multifunctional landscapes because, as I said before, there is more income because there is more crop productivity, and on the other side, you need to buy less external inputs, so you have less cost. So as a result, the profit increase. And we have with different mathematical models using also real data, different type of spatially explicit models. We calculate, okay, how much habitat for pollinators and natural and semi-natural habitat in general we can restore without losing profit, without the farmers losing profit. And you can see there that there are different curves because these are for different places in the earth, and there are different assumptions and models. But overall, we have found a very clear pattern that we can restore a minimum on 20% of natural area without losing profit. So overall, this landscape does not lose any profit if we restore 20% natural area. Of course, this means moving from, for example, 2% of natural habitat to 20%, or 3% from natural habitat to 20%. We did not work with places that you go and have, for example, 80% of forest. So the idea is not to touch that forest, of course. We are working here with restoration, and this 20% is very important because of the new biodiversity framework that is coming with the CBD and the importance of restoring biodiversity within agricultural landscapes. And here you can see an example of why we can restore biodiversity and natural and semi-natural habitats without losing money. This is one of the farms that we work. And you can see there are 3 corridors where the farmers used to sow there every year and they lose money because they are treating homogeneously a land that actually is heterogeneous. And these are opportunities within these biological corridors where farmers are losing money to increase and restore natural and semi-natural habitat. And this is a very common pattern, and it happens in the US and all over the world. So here we map all over the world where are the places that need most restoration, and you can see more red, more restoration is needed. You can see are the main agricultural places in the world. So we can see that multifunctional landscapes can be developed in a productive way, providing more food, more stable food, food of quality. They can be profitable. But why most of the farmers are not doing this? And there are many barriers, of course, but one of the barriers is the ecological knowledge. So creating a homogeneous landscape is something that is technologically very simple. You follow a technological package and you need to buy a lot of things, but agronomically it's very simple. On the contrary, creating this multifunctional landscape that restore biodiversity and provide a lot of benefits for human beings, you need to buy less things, you need to use less external input, but you need to have a higher local ecological knowledge to plan this design and the landscape level. And this is something very important and that we are working a lot with the farmers. So to end, we call them multifunctional landscape because they not only provide crop productivity, but they also provide multiple benefits for society, ecological, social, and economic benefits. And this is only one example because I don't have more time. And we have estimated that, for example, in 10,000 hectares, homogeneous landscape provide only 25 jobs. In contrast, in 10,000 hectares, multifunctional landscape provide 6,700 jobs. And this is including technology, including improving the working conditions of the farmers. So in a planet where unemployment is a big issue and the lack of livelihoods is a big issue, agriculture and farmers can be a solution to create more livelihoods, more real jobs, and to restore the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Garibaldi. Very informative research, and of course the information that you shared with us on a global manner where you are conducting this work, and pointing out that this multifunctional landscapes and the importance of many species of pollinators to improve crop productivity, and of course that farmers need ecological knowledge. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, Professor Garibaldi will not be with us during question time, but I'm sure if we do receive some questions, we could maybe try to see whether we could send it to him and he could maybe respond later. Our next speaker is Arjumand Nizami. He is the country director, Pakistan Hal Vitas, and she will present online. Arjumand Nizami, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and very happy to speak today with learned participants, and I've been really enjoying presentations since yesterday. Just a word about my introduction. I am a representative of a civil society organization, and that is the perspective from which I am speaking with you today. Helvetas is a Swiss bilateral development organization, and most of our work is with smallholders, small farmers in geographical locations which are usually resource deficient in many ways, and I'll explain a couple of examples in my presentation. I'll just share my screen with you. And I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, if you can just put it on full screen. Great, thank
Yeah.
you. You can go ahead.
Thank you. So my topic was smallholder system, resilience building in smallholder system, and in my understanding, it is characterized by optimizing opportunities, climate and resource production factor. I say climate particularly for high altitude areas where I have come across farmers who hardly have 4 or 5 or 6 months cultivation or agricultural window within which they have to ensure that their subsistence farming is rewarding enough for feeding their farming household. Similarly, optimizing soil and water and land resources for production. Technology needs to be appropriate, particularly for weaker farmers, because in smallholder system, migration has been a frequent element. Most of the weak people are left behind who take care of the agricultural operations. It should also aim at achieving self-sufficiency in food production for the family, especially in remote districts, resilience against natural shocks, and also market fluctuations, less dependence on external inputs. This is extremely essential in order to save costs and really cater for market fluctuation. And also it should aim at sustainable food production. So it is not really a farming decision from one day to the other. This is a farming family in smallholder system, which needs to remain capable of cultivating their lands over a longer term. So keeping these elements in view, I am happy to share 2 examples which we introduced in Elvitas in high altitude and sub-mountainous areas. One has been vertical vegetable farming. This experience has been mostly implemented with smallholder women farmers in Gilgit-Baltistan and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Those who know Pakistan in mountainous areas, this has been very successful, especially because these people have very little agricultural land. Most of these villages and women's mobility to market is very restricted, and usually inputs are not frequently and regularly available for agriculture farming. So in this vertical farming system, we have introduced a kind of tunnel-like structure. As you can see, 1,200 square feet of land. It can be also halved in case land is really deficient. So in a family courtyard also, this agriculture vegetable farming is possible. It is accompanied with a net and with some wire mesh and maybe mulching sheet to prevent weeds prevalence, and a weighing balance, just as basic tools for vertical farming. And we have accompanied this with training to women for vegetable production with different suitable varieties that can grow in vertical farming fashion. This is very much founded on indigenous knowledge of traditional vegetable farming, and probably not very much novel for several scientists and many of us who have been practicing agriculture in our lives. But for many women, this was a change of approach from bush farming, for example, as you can see, tomato cultivation compared to vertical farming. And results have been very, very encouraging. For example, in terms of resource optimization, if you look at it, the quantity of land, the size of land for the production was quite enormous. So 1/4 of land for the same quantity of vegetable production, 50% water reduction. It was designed to really cater for hailstorms or windstorms or cyclones kind of shocks. And we were using, the women were using full potential of the vertical farming, for example, intercropping with cabbage. It is home-based. It has market potential with lots of neighborhood families buying vegetable from some of these women. Food security and nutrition, certainly very easy for women and for children also to reach out to the vegetables and consume. It is less drudgery for women in terms of overall cultivation management. And in terms of economics, results have been really brilliant. We have tried this in Gilgit-Baltistan and KP, and probably these economic figures may be different from one area to the other, but overall the return has been extremely encouraging. And I forgot to mention also that the picking period also extended, so we also achieved seasonal advantage in vertical farming compared to the regular farming of vegetables. The second example I would like to share with you is from paddy. This is not subsistence farming or homestead farming. This is really commercial farming in which rice is sold to the international market. We have implemented a project called VAPRO, Water Efficient Rice and Cotton Production, in Punjab since 2015. And certainly rice is an extremely important economic crop for Pakistan, and but it is also very high on water consumption. So we introduced alternate wetting and drying tubes. This was important for farmers who are at the tail end of the canal and they do not receive irrigation water fully. Most of these farmers are small farmers. And their economy of rice production was heavily affected because of lack of water provision, and most of their dependence was on irrigation water, groundwater table. So it works through a simple tube, very simple technology. A perforated tube is inserted in the ground, and water is provided 2 weeks after the transplanting is over. And whenever water reaches 15 centimeter height above the ground, it is time for irrigation. So most average that we have calculated is 7 instead of 12 irrigations, or 8 instead of 12 irrigations is about 30% saving of water, and enormous amount of agrochemicals and external inputs also saved. So in terms of economic return, this has been a very useful technique for the farmers. Why this is important? Because water is generally free in Pakistan. We are not built on irrigation water on a volumetric basis. There is a fixed cost that farmers have to pay, and that is a very nominal cost. So since water is heavily subsidized, there is no incentive for farmers to save water or apply technologies that save water. But in case of AWD, we have calculated different farm economies with individual farmers with their help, and we have arrived to the fact that this way of cultivation not only saves water, but it also is economically better for them, better yields, or at least same yields. That's our target. Saving on external inputs, and also lots of saving on electricity bills for fetching groundwater for irrigation. So the main takeaways from these two examples is that if we have technology for resource efficiency, which is appropriate and it is affordable and simple, there are high chances that these are applicated and appreciated by the farmers. And our main aim for working with different agricultural experts and really simplifying technologies is that it should have a good case for women, for example, for resource poor farmers, and it should be easy to apply. It should really bring efficiency in agricultural operations. Participation of private sector is important here, particularly in case of paddy. When you saw the case of alternate wetting and drying system, it has been private sector which has been largely investing in introducing this to the farmers. And this was kind of public-private partnership in rice cultivation between sourcing agents and the companies and the farmers. And private sector has really invested in introducing this technology and encouraging farmers to really understand this technique in terms of farm economy. Resilient farming system leads to improved farming families' well-being with improved nutrition, improved yields, improved income, and puts less burden on agricultural economy of the country with reduced import bills. So as an NGO, I can say that, I did not try to present this as a technical case, but more as a social or economic case. That technology is important, actors are important, but farmers would only be encouraged once we really demonstrate this technology in the field and really show the case in terms of economic and environmental benefits. I stop here and I would be very happy to take questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Arjumand. That was very interesting and excellent information that you shared with us on the efficient production for resilience in smallholder systems. And the two examples that you gave in terms of the use of vertical vegetable farming with remarkable results, as well as the use of alternate wetting and drying techniques. Very interesting and informative. And I'm sure there will be some questions. So if you could stay with us, I know it is already late in the afternoon in Pakistan. So thank you very much. We then move on to the next speaker, and that is Ben Fox. And on behalf of Walter Jenner, who is a microbiologist and founder of Healthy Soils Australia, and Ben Fox sent a presentation for us with a video. So we are looking forward to listen and, to that. Thank you, Ben.
Hello, my name's Ben Fox. I'm co-presenting with Walter Jenner from Regenerate Earth. Today I'm going to take you through some of the potential for farmer-led regeneration from an Australian perspective, particularly looking at agricultural ecosystems health. So we'll look at why Australia is unique in this space and some of our very old ecosystems. We'll go through some of the mechanisms by which we can actually manage and look out for and control these, or influence, I should say, these agricultural ecosystems. And then, of course, we'll tie it all together with some of the current things that are the cutting edge of Australia and our take on how we're doing this stuff. So strap in. So in the agricultural ecological management space, Australia has something truly unique to offer. The continent here, because it's massively stable plate tectonics, is very, very old, almost unimaginably so. And that means that our soils here are leached. We have incredibly nutrient deficient soils, very, very old. And over time, they have simply been washed clear of many, many nutrients that other continents take for granted. And this means that there has been a co-evolution here of highly efficient soil microbial ecologies in symbiosis with plants and animals. So there is a very complex ongoing web of very efficient systems. And these processes underpin Australia's highly resilient productive natural biosystems and our incredible natural capital values. One of the key valuable functional elements of the Australian co-evolved ecosystems we mentioned earlier is the Australian germplasm, the genetic material within seeds that is the basis of the primary production that drives the food web and connects into the soil microbial ecologies we saw earlier. And so these germplasms, these seeds, have become incredibly good at connectivity, but also, as you know, photosynthesis drives the primary production of the entire food web from photosynthesis and connectivity with the underground mycorrhizal fungi. So the germplasm is core to this, but is also portable and can be moved around and offers great utility as a result. So, of course, it all happens and it's all driven through the engine room of the soil microbial earth interface, this incredibly complex hyperobject of fungi, bacteria, the plant roots and the soil chemistry and all the animals, both big and small, that are moving around within this space. And the image that you're looking at here, for example, is essentially growing on wind-blown silica sand with a fine coating of red oxide dust, which gives it that red colour. But what you're looking at there is essentially white sand in the Nunatara lands in the western part of Australia. And those plants there are growing with an incredibly complex and powerful connection driven through that soil microbial earth interface. This is why, despite being ancient, despite being weathered, incredibly leached, incredibly poor soils, Australia has these green deserts, these amazing low rainfall savannas, these grasslands with these highly productive ecosystems, and all supported by these incredibly complex and long-term evolved ecosystems. And we can manage this germplasm, and we can manage these symbiotic ecosystems, these soils, through 21st century smart land management. These tools exist. These tools are currently being developed. Australia is a world leader in a lot of this space, particularly in grazing and arid lands. The dividends are huge. Done well and done correctly, this results in food security, and this results in hydrological cooling. We get away from these dangerous hydrological extremes that we've seen, the flooding. We get away from the flooding, we get away from the desertification, we get away from the heat waves, and we can stabilise and thrive with better food security and hydrological cooling. And doing this work requires not just the germplasm, but of course the deep knowledge, the skills, the frameworks, the understanding of what actually underpins these systems and these ecosystems. And Australia has this. We have very long arc of Indigenous knowledge, very diverse Indigenous cultures in Australia, and very experienced and committed to ecological management, ecological thinking, land management, and new ways of doing things as well as old. So we've gone through the unique co-evolutionary, the leached environment, the deficit soils of Australia, the complex soil-based ecosystems that form the interface, how we can manage this moving into the 21st century, and the deep knowledge that Australia possesses in a variety of these fields, in particular arid lands, rangelands, and grasslands management, and that this is something that we can offer to the world. And so thank you. My name is Ben Fox. I've been co-presenting with Walter Yainer for Regenerate Earth.
Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing Australia's perspectives on agricultural ecosystems and, of course, the application of regenerated agriculture. I believe he will not be online for questions. So our next speaker is online, and that is Paulo Peterson. He is the Executive Director Asesoria e Servicios o Proyectos en Agricultura Alternativa. I trust I pronounced it correct, Paulo. He is from Brazil. Thank you, and you got the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be here, sharing some learnings from our experiences in Brazil. I'm Paulo Peterson from ASPTA, a Brazilian NGO that advises family farming organization and peasant movements. My presentation is divided in three parts. The first addresses some conceptual aspects for the description and interpretation of the experience presented in the second part. In the end, I presented some core conclusions. the first idea is that we must understand agricultural resilience as a socio-ecological issue. Farming as a co-production process. It's a process to convert ecological goods in economic value through labor process. So we can think in farming as an economic ecological conversion process. In the whole agri-food systems, we have to think this and to understand and represent agri-food systems as a web of economic ecological flows. Based on the economic ecological flows that cross some stage of the socio-ecological metabolism, like appropriation from the nature, transformation, circulation, consumption, and excretion again to nature. But according to the mainstream science and conventional policies represent and promote these flaws solely as economic flaws, more specifically as financial flaws. So the problem is we promote linear economic ecological flaws. This promoting some landscapes, very homogeneous, high level of productive specialization, and in consequence, high level of socio-ecological vulnerability. When we're talking about socio-ecological resilience, there are many principles in different groups are studying this. I present here one of these studies. They propose 7 principles to building resilience in socio-ecological systems. Maintain diversity and redundancy, manage connectivity, manage slow variables and feedbacks, fosters complex adaptive system thinking, encourage learning, broaden participation, and promotes polycentric governance. So based on these concepts, this idea, I present some the experience that we documented in semi-arid region in Brazil. These experiences are some of these experiences are published in recently publications. These both publications, we studied some transformation process in a large scale socio-ecological transformation process in semi-arid region in Brazil. The most populous semi-arid region in the world, where half of Brazilian family farming is concentrated, and where the lowest human development indices were found in Brazil. And the beginning of this path of massive transformation coincides with the launch of a program to build systems for capturing and storing rainwater. This program, it's a contrasting with the historically adopted perspective by the states in this region. Instead of the notion of fighting against drought, the program is based on the notion of coexistence of Brazilian semi-arid. After 2 decades, the program has built more than 1,200,000 systems across the region. At the farm level, the system promotes a kind of trigger effect to unfold socio-technical trajectories of innovations. Water is a critical production factor in these conditions. So the effect of when farmers have the possibility to fight or to have space to innovate and to promote a web of innovations at farm level. But our studies understand also that these innovations at farm levels are totally connected of new institutional arrangements at community and territorial level. So there is a new institutional arrangement of collective action devices like farmer-to-farmer exchange, work rallies, community seed banks, solidarity revolving funds, fairs, and many others. And in the third level, the public policies. Many public policies, new public policies, a new generation of public policies oriented to family farming. And these three main principles of socio-ecological resilience are in this picture. Encourage learning, broaden participation, polycentric governance. So, in our studies, we represented agroecosystems as a cultivated and socially managed ecosystem. So there is a family farm as a social nucleus of agroecosystem management. And these innovations diversified the systems in different subsystems and some artificial ecological infrastructures, equipments, and new facilities to capture, store, transport, and process water, nutrients, and energy mobilized by the agroecosystems labor process. In other words, how to promote endogenous development based on local resources. And the super systems, the institutions that regulate economic exchange with the wider society. The state, markets, and we can understand markets not only one kind of market, but different kind of markets, territorial, conventional, institutional markets, and the communities where the family farmer exchange by reciprocity relations. So the result of this transition process, socio-ecological transition process, it's a complex web of economic ecological flows, some input flows representation on the left and the output flows representation. So different, it's a dense web of economic ecological flows. If we can assess the socio-ecological resilience from 2015 and 2019, this is a study in the state of Bahia. We did in 26 farms. We see that the index of socio-ecological resilience start from 0.29 and in 2019 is 2.60. So this is some parameters that we can evaluate, and the innovations related to these parameters during this period, only 5 years. So the idea, the main conclusions that farming resilience cannot be assessed and promoted as a quality detached of economic, social, ecological, cultural, and institutional dimensions of agricultural development. Farming resilience must be understood as an emerging result of a virtuous circle driven by the construction of autonomous and efficient agricultural economies, simultaneously oriented to meet the needs of farming families and rural communities and to regenerate and conserve the biophysical basis of agroecosystems. So the virtuous circle can be represented by the strong connection between the 10 elements of agroecology as proposed by FAO. So socio-ecological resilience, the element 6, as a result of the synergetic effect between productivity, diversity of agroecosystems, the efficient of use of and local resource, to co-creation of contextualized knowledge, re-evaluation of local food cultures, the cultivation of human and social values for development, solidarity, and regenerative economies based on democratic, accountable governance system. So the agroecological perspective can build and connect the 10 elements, and resilience is not an detached objective from our development programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Very rich and informative presentation that you presented to us, where you highlighted the building of resilience from grassroots in arid and semi-arid lands, and pointing out to us that it is a socio-ecological issue, and that it is an interaction between 10 elements of agroecology. As I mentioned then, our last speaker, Nicolas Sharp, is not with us. So this brings the end to our formal presentations. And this is now time for us to have some questions, and either hear from the audience or online. So please post your questions. We do have the two speakers with us, Paulo and Arjumant, and they will gladly give us some answers if questions has been posed to them. But before we go to that, first of all, I would like to ask Marcela Quintero, maybe just to introduce yourself again for the new group that are online, Marcela, and give your impressions and some takeaway messages. Thank you, Marcela.
Thank you, Chair. Marcela Quintero from the CIR and working at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and SEAT. So I would like to highlight 5 takeaway messages. First one, I think from the previous session and this one, there is a strong emphasis on looking crop production not only from the crop productivity angle, but also from the dimension of biodiversity conservation and water management, and the importance of managing these two components of the agroecosystems if we want to deliver multiple benefits, not only in terms of crop production, but also in terms of nutrition, income, and resilience. So I wanted to highlight that, I mean, the importance of previous presentations on the importance of biodiversity, for example, on that multifunctional role of agriculture. The second thing that when I see the different presentation is that scale and local assets matters at the moment of innovation processes. So we saw, for example, in the case of Pakistan, how the recognition of the local assets and the needs are really kind of shape what really can take off in very specific systems. So here is how contextualization of innovation processes to the local context is super important. And then this is linked to this presentation of Brazil, when it shows that technological innovation has to go hand in hand with institutional innovations, and being cognizant of all these interactions that happen when we talk about agriculture. So it's really beyond crops, but it's how technological innovations need also about that other institutional changes co-evolve with those technological innovations to make that technological innovation really common and uptake in those contexts. And then with that, I would like to close with the final two, that is this idea of the ecology of agriculture that was somehow already mentioned also by Peter from Brazil, and is how we understand ecology of agriculture not only as the biological and biophysical processes that occur in agriculture, but the social and ecological processes that happen in agriculture and that at the end kind of shape agriculture. And then I would like to highlight also the contribution on resilience parameters. This session is about ecosystem management, ecosystem approaches to improve resilience in farming systems. So how we know that we are improving resilience, I think there was an interesting approach here regarding resilience parameters, and probably something that we need probably to dig more and to see how resilience is measured also in other contexts, to see if we can try to arrive to a common set of indicators to evaluate how far we are getting into improving resilience in farming systems.
Thank you very much, Marcella. You might have seen Marco Arcieri is also here on the podium, and I would like him also just to introduce yourself and give us some impressions and take home messages. Thank you, Marco.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am Marco Arcieri. I'm the Vice President Honoraire of the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage. So we are kind of more focused on everything that is regarding water resources use. I think that the final remarks that have been just delivered by Marcella have covered mostly of the topics of the most important issues that have been discussed in this second session. So in my remarks, I would like to focus a little bit more. I think it was very insightful, and it was very interesting what has been shown by Dr. Nizami regarding this new opportunity to have rice irrigated with this alternate dry and wet technique, which is actually, I don't know if this is also acknowledged by Dr. Nizami, but this is something also that is actually very much carried out here in Italy, in the northern part of Italy, because maybe not many of you might know, but Italy is the most important rice producing country in Europe. So we are very much focused on rice production, especially trying to introduce new technologies and new methods of irrigating rice. So we have different approach that could be I would like to ask Dr. Nizami if what is the, I've seen of course the presentation, because here we have different approach. We might have dry seeding, we have the seeding is on dry soil and then we irrigate, or we can have soil covered with water and then we partially dry after the fifth leaf of rice has been rising. So what is the kind of mainly, what is the kind of approach you are using in your new approach for rice irrigation? And also if you have tested different varieties, because of course the response of this new technique is also depending on the kind of cultivar that is used for production. And also may I add to this, Chair, that there is a new very interesting frontier regarding rice production, which is what is currently being experienced, especially in the northern part of Italy, regarding drip irrigation for rice. So I know for sure that Netafim is carrying out some field trials on this, and this might be also something worthwhile to consider of course, under the framework of water, in this case, water resources optimization. So there is a lot to do, and I'm very keen to listen to what is the main approach that are you using now in Pakistan, Dr. Nizami. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Maybe while he's asking the question for Arjumand, if she can respond to Arjumand, please.
Thank you very much for this question. So in case of Pakistan, we have tried direct seeding approach as well. But if I compare the results between direct seeding and alternate wetting and drying tube, adaptation among farmers, for example, because again, I will speak from the NGO's perspective, and I'm more in touch with farmers and would like to really present farmers' perspective. The result was, or the feedback was, that DSR was not so much appreciated by the farmers because of the weed prevalence. Weed control is still our problem in DSR, and basically why farmers like to flood their fields is to control weeds. Now, in case of alternate wetting and drying, the benefit is that you still have weed control because rice is transplanted the way traditional rice is transplanted. But then the idea is to give stress to the crop after 2 weeks of transplanting, and provide irrigation only after it is really necessary. And the perforated tube is actually our information center from where the farmer reckons if there is time for irrigation. Initially, these tubes were manually observed by the farmers, but recently we have had very successful experience with digitizing tube observation through mobile phone. We have experimented about 50 acres of area on digital technology, and farmers can assess through his mobile phone whether it is ready, the field is ready for irrigation. This technique is not patent well with us. If you recall, International Rice Research Institute has first piloted this, and there are publications which you can access. So we have been very kind of fortunate to have IRRI on board on this project together with Westmill and Mars, which are international sourcing agents in Pakistan, and there are several local companies which are their partners, and they are cultivating rice. We have applied this on basmati rice. To answer your question, there are different varieties in basmati rice. This is an export rice, and we started this with basmati rice because there is a very interesting market pull actually from the international market, and there is a demand for water efficient rice, which is certified also by Sustainable Rice Platform standards. So in a way, there is a market pull, and the push is from the local extension departments, local companies, and Helvetas is actually a brokering organization, brokering relationship between researchers, private sector, government extension agents, and the farmers to really convince and conduct studies to really prove that this kind of technology is really rewarding. And economic studies is one of them. We have also conducted studies on weed prevalence and how agronomic techniques have been really useful in introducing these tubes, as opposed to conventional transplanting techniques. What has been the calculation of yields as opposed to conventional transplanting technique? The whole idea actually was piloted at the downstream farmers level, who have hardly 20% of the channel water. So so we thought if it is successful at that level, we certainly can upscale this to midstream and upstream farmers who have more access to water. And the ultimate message to the farmers was that you can save water, which is kind of a benefit to the state, who is the provider of irrigation water, even though water is free for the farmers. But on the other hand, as far as yield is concerned and as far as environmental safety is concerned, these are also the net returns from this kind of technique. It goes in favor of the farmer, it goes in favor of the farming households who live in that habitat, and also the state as a whole. I hope I could answer your question.
Thank you, Arjumand. Any questions from the audience? Good. We have received several questions here from the online participants. And the first one I would like to put forward to Paulo. You mentioned the virtuous interactions between the 10 elements of agroecology. And how do you see the relationship between efficiency and resilience as two of the 10 elements? Paulo?
Thank you for the question. Yes, based on the agroecological approach, we can how to build efficient systems in terms of convert ecological goods and economic values in based on local resources, not to import external resources, mainly from the markets. So ecological principles can understand local ecologies and to work in a co-production process. So the meaning of this idea is that we can work of different components and ecological and social elements at a local level, and this builds this kind of web of economic ecological flows. That is one of the main or the main principle to build resilience. So the principle to be more efficient are the same to be more resilient in those terms. So we have to think in terms of not only in economic flows, but in economic ecological flows.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Then we got another question for Adjumant, and that is, could you explain further how your work with vertical vegetable gardens helps to empower women, and what are the social implications and the social benefits of your work?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. So in terms of social benefit, I think let's visualize a high altitude farming family, and this family lives out of multiple livelihood resources. For example, some of the people may have migrated to other areas in search of labor, and women and elderly back home looking after their farming, livestock, small agricultural economy actually around the household. So in terms of empowerment for women, I think one is that we must consider that these kind of families, women are heavily workloaded. They have to perform their home chores, they have to perform their farming, their livestock, they are also engaged in several other activities. They are also responsible for their social networking, which is also one of the livelihood strategies. So there are two objectives to vertical farming. Number one, optimize resources so that they can really grow vegetables in minimum resources that they have, and maximize production for their family. The first objective is their own family and nutrition. And most of these families do suffer malnutrition and lack of access to secure food resources around the year. So in that sense, I think we have been able to reduce their work burden, by the fact that the vertical farming is less cumbersome, easy to monitor, easy to look after these vegetables, tending operations, watering, everything is easy, picking process is easy. Secondly, they have an extended season for vegetable collection, because of the tunnel and vertical methodology of cultivation. So more vegetables for the home, but there is always surplus production which they can sell. And this brings home economic revenue, economic benefit, economic empowerment. Earlier, most of the women, if I give you an example of one of the districts in Gilgit-Baltistan, most of these women cultivated vegetables for themselves, and that was also not enough. Half of the vegetable would probably be wasted because of the pest attack or hailstorm or something. Now, if they have an extended vegetable production time and they have surplus vegetables, they can also sell in the neighborhood. So this is an extra cash. So money saving on one hand, and then extra cash by selling vegetables. So this is economic empowerment also. So I would, if I finger count benefit, one is nutrition, the second is extra income. Then we have, of course, a lot of money saving for purchase of vegetables to fulfill family needs, and reduced need for external inputs. Most of these vegetables are almost organic. There is no external input required because these are grown in homestead environment and in vertical farming manner. There has been very little prevalence of pests. Therefore, we are super happy with this experience. So far, the scale has been very small. We have applied this for about 500 to 600 households, and we are now trying to upscale this in other cities and in other semi-urban areas where vegetable prices have really are really rising. And I must not forget to mention that this has been a very, very interesting experience, especially during COVID-19 times, when a lot of women did not have access to market, but their own vegetable garden was saving them. So we were very happy that there was food at home to rely on, even when access to market was very limited.
Thank you very much, Arjuman. We got the last question here to both or all the presenters, but of course it's only Paulo and Arjuman that are with us. So the question is, all panelists today agree that increased biodiversity can bring multiple benefits, and the topic of stability in yields and productivity was also touched on. If you got any comments for further elaborate on that, possibly with practical examples and success stories, would you like to share with us, Paulo, anything from yourself, and then Arjuman, if you could follow on after his reply.
Thank you. Yes, this is a very important question because this is very well known that biodiversity is a core condition to build sustainability in agricultural systems. But at the same time, we need to think in different scales or different, because we can't promote biodiversified systems if the markets can't receive different kind of productions. So one of the institutional environments is very important also to promote biodiversity. And I'm thinking in terms of the structure of markets. Today, peasant farmers are producing more and more commodities to deliver to industries, to ultra-processed foods, and this is one of the reasons that agroecosystems are more and more specialized, based on monocultures. So this is not only a technical issue. We have to, how I said before, it's the technical innovation is totally engaged in institutional innovation. And we have to build other kind of institution to promote biodiversity.
if I can continue with this and add, I think I would like to emphasize on public-private partnership. And I would, when I say public-private partnership, I would also like to include actors from research, academia, and others who have, of course, very important contribution in agriculture and sustainable production. In the examples that I've shown, or the examples that I have not shown in Elvita's life, when I speak about agriculture, I would say that sustainable farming or sustainable ecological agricultural production is only successful if we really recognize that this is really role of multi-actors in a multi-stakeholder participation manner. Now we have a lot of very good research around the world, and I just gave one example of AWD, and we know there are lots of papers which have been published, and like we just heard that it is also applied in many other countries. Why is it that these kind of technologies are not reaching farmers, or these are not really applied or multiplied like jungle fire? Why? Because lots of research sits in our shelves and it is not really applied in the field, and farmers are not really educated on what do they get out of using these kind of technologies, or improved technology, or improved way of doing agriculture. Sometimes this is just subtle, small, little improvisations that they have to introduce to their agriculture, but they don't, because there's no education and there's no outreach to the farmers. And this is where multiple actors really count. NGOs can play a very important role. Academia, universities can play a very important role, and at the same time, private sector. I really believe that private sector has a very important role in really introducing these kind of techniques, not only out of their corporate social responsibility, but also under the market pull. To give you an example of basmati rice, there is a lot of demand for sustainable rice platform standard rice. It is growing with time, and there are several indicators which companies have to fulfill before they really qualify for European markets, for example. And water efficiency is one of them. Use of external agrochemicals or aflatoxin are other similar indicators for international markets. So in order to achieve their profitability and their due market share, if they would like to invest on ground with farmers in developing countries, I think these are the partnerships which must be encouraged. And these are being encouraged in my country, for example, in case of basmati rice and cotton, agriculture extension departments of the government, they are partnering with private sector. And together, if they team up, and organizations like ourselves who reach out to the farmers, these three forces, when come together, really can achieve some very good results. Now, the challenge is subsistence farming, because these are the farmers who do not have any access to private sector, or private sector, they are not very interesting for private sector. I think there a greater role lies with development agents who digest these kind of techniques and technologies and messages which Paolo and many other researchers are bringing, to really bring those to the farmers and make it workable for them, or adapt them to their context. That's my job. And once we can adapt this to their context and really learn from them as well, a very nice technological design can emerge, which is replicable, which is acceptable, and which brings sustainable results. So I would emphasize on multi-actor partnership as a key to the success, to all of us, what all of us want to achieve.
Thank you very much, Arjumand. In closing, this of course brings us to the end of this session, and from the messages that were presented by the four presenters, I believe we should all strive for all production to build the resilience of people, communities, and ecosystems, considering that natural resources must be protected and regenerated as elements of living nature. Let us again just thank all the presenters. And before we break, we are going to have lunch now, a little bit earlier than anticipated. And I would just mention that we invite you to follow the launch event on implementation of the One Country, One Priority country projects, and that you should also be back for this afternoon session, 1400 Central European Time. So enjoy your lunch, and in terms of the audience here, I would like Emma just to announce the invitation in terms of the lunch for this afternoon. Please, Emma.
Yes, thank you very much for being here. For you that are in the room, we are inviting to have lunch together in front of the Sheikh Zayed Center downstairs, where the OCOP program will be launched. So it will be served light lunch to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That then ends our session for this morning. Thank you very much. Went off well.